The Silent Voices of Bethel. This is an exclusive investigative journalism report into a child sex abuse in the Jehovah's Witnesses. Unlike many best stories, this investigative report came from a tip-off sometime last year, March 2021. The email came in and the team set about trying to find it was true. The Jehovah's Witness organization can be wary of outsiders. Getting information is quite a tussle. But over time, in the span of over a year, the team spoke to the victims of the abuse and some of the former members of the religion. Going into this personally, I had little to no knowledge about this religion. Facts like they do not celebrate birthdays, do not celebrate Christmas, and do not accept blood transfusions. Taking into consideration the ethos of investigative reporting journalism, by building a network of sources, the reporters gathered information and evidence. The title of this investigative report came from the analogy of the little children who were suffering in silence in the hands of those who were to get them. Miss Daria is a 30-something-year-old woman who shares her sexual experience as a child. She boldly describes how she was molested by a man who apparently was to be a spiritual guide to her and her mother. Mr. Peter Stewart, at the time 60-year-old man with a senior role in the Jehovah's Witness, was as respected and admired in the congregation, but little Daria knew his true character. Not having enough of this uncouth character, Peter Stewart was convicted of abusing another child. This conviction led him to write an apology, handwritten letter addressed to Daria's mother, highlighting how he abused her daughter when she was 4 years old. This case brought to light questions which were raised to whether more could have been done to protect her. After Mr. Stewart's apology letter went public, a woman identified as Michelle realized that she was the other child who was mentioned to be abused by the same man. The details clearly juggled Michelle's memory into details that she was in fact the other child. But the question here is, how did one senior man in Jehovah's Witness religion, Peter Stewart, harm two women in their childhood? What more could have been done to protect them? With an existing document, why is it that some members of the congregation had known that he, the abuser, posed a risk to children and no action was taken? In 2019, another victim by the name Lacey Jones came out and said that another respected member of the religion with a senior position in the organization and also happens to be a stepfather abused her. Jehovah's Witness being an international organization, this thing seems like an international defect. In America, a lawyer describes how he has fought so many cases against the organization and how it's not good news. Other people have also come out with crucial paperwork with context of reports of abuse kept by the Jehovah's Witnesses in the US revealed. Miss Holly McGowan from Omaha, Nebraska, brought a civil claim against Watchtower. Through this process, names, descriptions, and actions which were taken when an accusation was taken. In another continent, Australia, similar paperwork came to light and surprisingly, over 1,000 people were accused of abuse and 400 of these are alleged to have molested more than one child. With a tip-off based in Britain, there could be a database of abuse at the headquarters in Bethel. A whistleblower came forth by the name Ryan, not his real name because his Jehovah's Witness friends do not know he has woken up. Mr. Ryan, a 41-year-old, used to work at the organization in the switchboard office in Patterson, New York. One of his duties was to transfer calls which came into the branch, including those from elders who had become aware of allegations of child abuse. He recalls personally receiving about 5 calls a day from elders needing advice on this topic, which will mean that he and his colleagues would get roughly 20 per day and 5,000 a year if the same patterns were followed. Of course, there could have been multiple calls from the same congregational leaders or could have been about alleged abuse by someone from outside the Jehovah's Witnesses. but the work left a deep impression on him. This kind of detail is also extremely useful for the reporters because Ryan describes how he will transfer the calls to something called the service or legal desk, who will then provide guidance to the elders, but his knowledge stops there. In order to understand what might be in the database, the team interviews former and current elders to see what records they've seen and how some cases have been handled. A former elder in the congregation, Mr. Rob McGregor, describes how Bethel had given him instruction to tell a woman who had just disclosed being sexually abused as a child, and that while she had every jurisdiction and right to report the allegations to the police, the Jehovah's Witness organization said would never encourage it. This situation made him deeply uncomfortable and quite disturbed, and the Jehovah's Witness elders at the accused congregation told him that despite the perpetrator confessing to the abuse, he had been seen and deemed repentant because the abuse offense had occurred years ago. And this played a huge role in Mr. Rob's decision to leave the witnesses, and he later reported the abuse allegation to the police. Miss Daria, who now works in social services, thinks that people whose jobs involve protecting children should be trained to understand the Jehovah's Witness world. In her experience and that of other victims featured in this report, the way the matter was handled by the witnesses compounded their trauma. The Jehovah's Witnesses say that under the current child protection policies, if a child is at danger, they make a report to the police, even if they're not required by law.